Joined now by the great one, Rick Bozich from WDRB.com. Make sure you're giving him a follow. He is one of the foremost sports reporters in this region. Rick, thank you, sir. Great to see you. I know you've been busy. Lots of things going on with college basketball, Kentucky, Louisville, Indiana, and of course now Indiana looking for a new football coach. And they seem to have finally gotten the memo, Rick, that and I say that because it was been announced that there is a pledge of $3 million in NIL funds towards football. That I guarantee you, that's more than has been paid out in totality up to this point. Without it, probably not even close, as a matter of fact. So for Indiana, that's a lot of money. That may not be Texas money or Michigan money, but that's a lot of money, and that can get a lot of players because they put together. They've had decent teams and they've had good talent. They may not have had, again, Michigan or Ohio State or Alabama talent, but they've had good talent that can win games without that. So this is only going to make that better. And I think that they finally understand that they cannot walk down the hall and hire their coach because they can get him cheap and whatever. I've been, this may not have anything to do with it, but I've been tracking a private plane that left Bloomington and has just made several stops all around the South for about 4 to 5 hours at a time. And
where were the stops?
Trying to match all those up. On the 18th, which was over a week ago, but I think on a Friday, that would have put him in Batavia, Ohio, near Columbus, which I don't know if that was over here to talk to Justin Fry, which I don't see him as a legitimate candidate. But after that, from Monday, the plane went to Atlanta, Georgia, Atlanta Hartsfield, and was there for quite some time. It left there and went to Cordell, Georgia, where it stayed there overnight and then left early in the morning. And from there, it went to Leesburg, Florida, which is close to Orlando, I believe. And then it stopped in Newberry, South Carolina, which is near Columbia, South Carolina. And now they are on the move again, just crossing the North Carolina border as we speak.
Wow, you're doing some detective work. First of all, I apologize for being a few minutes late today. I got caught in traffic taking Ruby to doggy daycare. But anyway,
that's the most important thing. Ruby is important.
The Atlanta stop, I can understand. That's where the Parker search firm is. I know they're using a search firm. I don't know if it's Parker, but that's where a lot of the stuff goes down. You can get into Atlanta without people seeing you, and
right.
They have a facility there and a bunch of you can do like remote Zoom type interviews with people without flying them in. I'm surprised that we're talking about this. I know that you were pretty convinced, I think, that they were going to make a change from following Indiana football for as long as I have, which I can still remember the Rose Bowl season. I've never seen them really have the urgency to compete in football. Maybe this is the two things we mentioned, the coaching change and the $3 million in NIL money that's been committed. And they made sure they got that out there yesterday. So whoever's considering the job knows that they're going to be coming in without, being 50 yards down the field from the middle of the pack in the Big Ten as more of an encouragement, because I'm sure there are people that are telling them you don't want to go there. It's a coach killer, job, because most of the guys who I looked back last night, I think the only guy who did not get fired at IU was over the last 50 some years was Terry Hepner, who passed away. Isn't that right?
That sounds about right.
Allen got fired. Wilson got fired. Lynch got fired. DiNardo got fired. Cameron got fired. Mallory got fired. Corso got fired. Weiss left on his own after 1 year.
Yes.
And John Pond got fired. So they all got fired. But, it's way past time. It should have happened in the 90s. But the institutional commitment to making football a priority has to be there. And I think the commitment has to also come from the fans, not in terms of showing up, but putting pressure on the administration to get it right. And I think they've started to do that. And shows like this and other podcasts that have been critical of Indiana football play a role in it too. I mean, for a long time, it was sort of just shrugged off, and more people now are putting pressure, I think, on the administration to say, hey, you can't continue this way. You're going to get left so far behind, and as these conference realignment things keep going, Indiana's in a very vulnerable position.
Yeah, well, I for one thing, obviously the change in college athletics, it has been massive. I mean, it's a 180. It is night and day, the difference. So and Scott Dolson knows this. This is riding on his back. He's carrying. Yeah. This is a big old pack of weight he's got to carry because he's the one that wrote that check or had Indiana have to write that check to Tom Allen. So that's on his watch. And now he has to get this right. Whether this is a basketball school or not, this has to become a football-driven athletics department. It can be a basketball school all at once, but the athletics department has to be driven by football. And for that to happen, you have to commit to it. Besides the NIL, now they've got to work on facilities. Their facilities suck. They're one of the worst in the Big Ten. Northwestern has better facilities than Indiana. They made that commitment. And Purdue has made that commitment with the brand new facilities that they have built and the enhancements to their stadium. The stadium is fine at IU. It's the other things. It's the indoor workout facility that looks like it's just an oversized garage. You walk in there and it's like, wow, there's nothing that excites you when you go in there. But it's just a whole how football is looked at. People, the fans, I'm just waiting for basketball season. I'm just waiting for basketball season. That has to stop. It has to be a two-pronged thing. You have to be charged up and have confidence in the program. And I get that there has to be something to have confidence in. And I think that they finally get it. I don't know who the coach is going to be, but I think it is going to be someone that it would not have been 3 years ago. This is a different hire than it would if just 3 years ago. Someone like whether it's Tom Herman or Dave Clawson from Wake Forest, whoever this ends up being, I don't know. There's just a lot of names out there, and I'm not going to try to guess who it is. But I got to thinking Gus Malzahn yesterday. I'm like, well, what's his deal with Central Florida? Because I looked up and he wasn't making a ton, and I'm like, he's been a real successful coach that's kind of sitting there. I don't know if he's in the mix or not, but man. But Tom Herman is a very interesting one because he's at FAU and he was at Houston and Texas. He knows about offense. And I don't care that he got fired from Texas because Shaka Smart got fired from Texas. And look what he went and did. He went and took Marquette and made them a better program than Texas is. So the importance of making this hire, and this is not something Indiana has done well, Rick, hiring football coaches.
No, you're right. It's a signature hire for Scott Dolson. It's going to be whenever his tenure at IU ends, and I hope it's not for a long time because I like Scott.
Yes,
this is what will be high in his legacy. What did he do with football? How did he make a difference with football? And you're right. They need to create a product that excites people and fill the seats in the stadium that they have. You can't keep playing in a league with schools that are putting in 80, 90, 100,000 people for 6 or 7 football games, and you're putting in 35 or 40,000 and opting out of series with schools like Louisville because you don't want to take 2 losses. You can't operate. That's out of weakness. You got to operate out of strength, and they've got to find a really good coach, but they've also got to find somebody with a vision who can sell that vision to, players, who can sell it to fans, who can sell it to the media, and who can sell it with boosters that can make a difference in terms of contributing to facilities. And I always, we've talked about this before. One of the greatest benefits of working in this market is I see how Indiana does things, I see how Louisville does things, and I see how Kentucky does things. There is no reason that Indiana can't have a football program that should be as good as Kentucky or Louisville's, but it hasn't. And why is that? Because it hasn't committed to doing that. Louisville, 40 years ago, swung for the fences and got Howard Schnellenberger, and he changed the whole perception of Louisville football. They built a new stadium. They recruit now. Anybody, they go out and they still produce coach, man. They went to the Big Ten and took a Big Ten coach away. You look at Kentucky, they bounced around for a number of years. They finally got Rich Brooks in there, who had been successful at Oregon and then got fired from the Rams. And he came in there and he changed the way they think about football. And then they had Joker Phillips and he took it off course, but they got rid of him just like that because it's like, no, they're not going to put up with losing. And they brought in Mark Stoops and he's made them, a formidable team in the SEC East. We both remember in the 80s and 90s, Indiana won its share of game against Kentucky. So they're not the same level program anymore. So it's got to be the right coach, but it's got to be the right commitment by Indiana to being serious about football.
Yeah, and it's got to be a guy that can have a dynamic personality, I think, because he is going to have to save the players that haven't left, which may be easier to count than those that have entered the portal already. But just because someone's entered the portal does not necessarily mean that you will not see them on the Indiana roster next year.
Right.
They're just saying, hey, man, I'm putting my name out there.
But see what kind of offers I can get. Yeah.
And that's what you do. They would be ill-advised not to do that. But he's also going to draw in some people that you probably wouldn't have had, especially with whomever it is. If it's a particular offensively minded coach that likes to throw the ball or whatever, that may be how you get a better quarterback. That's how you don't lose. Daggone, I'm losing the kid's name that ended up, he was committed to Indiana and then decommitted and went to TCU.
Hoover.
Yes, Josh Hoover. You get guys like that and keep them. Indiana has lost 5 quarterbacks to the portal in the last 3 years as of right now, with Sorsby and Dexter Williams in there, Jack Tuttle, Bazelak, and then Michael Penix Jr. So
they lost, how many recruits did they have? They lost McCullough, went to Oklahoma. They had that commitment from the running back from Cincinnati who's playing at Notre Dame, Payne, I think his name is. There have been way too many of them. And it almost looked like this year, and it's one of the reasons that I was convinced that Tom Allen had lost all momentum. When you look at a lot of the guys they got commitments from in the high school recruiting class, they weren't recruiting against other Big Ten schools. They were recruiting against MAC schools for the most level. And I think that you can coach a few guys up, but you can't have an entire class of guys who you're going against Appalachian State and Toledo. And I know the Toledo coach is a possibility for IU or Ohio University or wherever. You've got to be able to go in there and get a few guys that other Big Ten schools want.
Robert says that Oklahoma's payroll is about $14 million. I don't know if that's true or not, but whether it is,
that's what Ryan Day has hinted at. Yeah.
Indiana does not. I'm not saying Indiana they don't have to be that. Look, they have drawn enough talent to win games. They had enough talent to be bowl eligible this year.
Yeah, they did.
It was mistakes. It was bad calls. It was not having a quarterback in place to start with. And the OC, all of this different stuff that just went into just really taking that season down, and they could have been successful. Now, if you add $3 million to that, now you're going to have more success. You may not be challenging for the college football playoffs right now, but you're going to be looking at a bowl every year at least. So that's a gigantic step up. And then you go from there. If you can garner some success, you build on that success.
Yeah. They need to be able to punch at their own weight, and their own weight would be Purdue, Illinois, Minnesota, Northwestern for sure, Maryland, Rutgers. There's no reason to lose 3 in a row to Maryland and Rutgers. They can't accept that. Not beating Ohio State and Michigan most years, that's probably going to be the way it is. But you ought to be able to beat them once every 10 years, not once every 50 years. And that's one thing I go back to Stoops. He's changed the dynamic of he's beat Tennessee. He's won 3 of the last 5 against Florida. He's changed the way people think about Kentucky football, and that's part of what the new coach has to do. Sell his vision for how they're going to do that. What's your identity going to be? What are you trying to achieve at IU? How are you going to do it? Missouri's another one. They hired Eli Drinkowitz. Missouri they had some success under Gary Pinkel, then they lost other momentum. They brought Drinkowitz in, and now this year they've only lost 2 games, and they're going to go to a really good bowl game. And what are they known as? A really good passing program. When Bazelak was the quarterback there, and he didn't produce it the way they needed, they recruited right over him, and he went out in the portal. That's the way you have to operate your team.
Yeah, and hopefully Indiana will see what they have left over. And
what's your sense? Who would you like, and what's your sense of who they're really serious about?
You know what? I have no idea who they're really serious about. Okay. But a name that I like is Grubbs, the Kalen DeBoer's offensive coordinator. He's been with Kalen since before Fresno State, before he came to Indiana, and then he's been his OC. And so when you have a guy that is as good of offensive mind that Kalen is, but yet he has an offensive coordinator that he trusts, I'm like, whoo, that guy, he's got someone he's learning from. And I like how Kalen runs things. So this is where he has learned. He's learned a lot from Kalen DeBoer. Kalen DeBoer has been a winner everywhere he's gone. I like him for that reason. He's young. He can invigorate things. That's probably my personal favorite, but I don't have any dislikes other than some of the crazy names that have been thrown out there that like have Gruden? No chance. Gruden, Rod Carey. There was one more, I think, but Gruden is.
Mike Hart's name seemed to be hot yesterday.
Yeah, there's no way
he's not even been a coordinator yet, right?
Well, I think that Dylan Sin made the best comment about that. He goes, he probably thinks he's going to be the Michigan coach in a couple of months.
Yeah.
So
I don't think he's even the number 1 guy there. Sharon Moore is. I'm not in favor, and I don't even know if he's legit or not. It's Paul Chryst of Wisconsin. I mean, he's okay, but he was a Wisconsin guy in the
school
Wisconsin system, and they've run the football, and I don't think you can replicate that formula to IU and win. And we saw what Bielema did there, and he's gone off to Arkansas and now Illinois and failed, not being at Wisconsin. So I'm not sure Chryst is the guy. Herman, I'm not sure about. He was a really hot name, obviously, 8 or 10 years ago before he went to Houston, and then he was even hotter at Houston and went to Texas and didn't do well there. It's hard to. A lot of guys haven't done well at Texas. He's got Midwest roots. He coached at Ohio State. He seems to be very personable, but I don't know if he's the right guy for the job. You mentioned I think Clawson would be if he'd be interested, or Malzone. Those are 2 names that I think are fascinating.